Dear students, today I will discuss on antigen, antibody and immunogenicity. I will tell you about antibody, its structure, function, antigen and what are the factors a molecule must have to be an immunogen. Now, we have immune system inside us. It is a complex network of many different cells and organs. And immune system has the ability to distinguish between self and non-self. When the immune system recognizes a non-self molecule present inside our system, it readily recognizes it and eliminates it. Now, immune response can be divided into innate immune response and adaptive immune response. Innate immune response is also called non-specific immune response and it is present in all forms of life. Whereas adaptive immune response is found only in jawed vertebrates, that is vertebrates having jaw. Now, innate immune response is called non-specific because it has no memory, and every time antigen enters into our system, the innate immune response is the same. However, in case of adaptive immune response, since it has memory, it keeps the memory of that particular antigen. And next time the same antigen enters into our system, all the memory cells, they fight against that antigen. And thus, adaptive immune response is more stronger than innate immune response. Now, adaptive immune response is mediated by immunoglobulins or antibodies, and these molecules are secreted from B lymphocytes. B lymphocytes is a major type of cell of immune system and it is generated in our bone marrow, though it got its name B from bursa febrisers, which is an organ present in birds. In our system, in human, B lymphocytes are generated in the bone marrow. After their generation, they come to blood, and on the surface of a B lymphocyte, there are receptors called B cell receptors, which are also membrane bound immunoglobulins. And a mature B lymphocyte membrane has almost 1.5 into 10 to the power 5 molecules of B cell receptors. Now, if we look into the structure of B cell receptor, then we will see the carboxy terminal end of the B cell receptor is embedded on the membrane of the B cell surface, and there is a transmembrane domain spanning the membrane of B lymphocyte, and there is a short cytoplasmic tail. The cytoplasmic tail is too short to transduce any signal. So, there is another heterodimer called Ig alpha and Ig beta, which has a long cytoplasmic tail. So, the membrane bound immunoglobulin molecule needs help of this heterodimer to transduce any signal into the B cell. When a B cell receptor encounters an antigen, readily the short cytoplasmic tail interacts with the heterodimer and the heterodimer transduces the signal inside the B lymphocyte. The B lymphocyte gets activated and it starts cell division. Continuously it divides for 4 to 5 days and produces a number of B lymphocyte clones. And some of them mature into plasma cells. Plasma cells secrete immunoglobulins, and some of the activated B lymphocytes remain as memory B lymphocytes for future use. Now, plasma cells secrete the membrane bound immunoglobulins. Now, this is the structure of secretory immunoglobulin molecule. Each immunoglobulin molecule is composed of 4 polypeptides. 2 of them are called heavy chains since they are long, and 2 are called light chains since they are short. Now, each light chain is joined to each heavy chain through interchain disulfide linkages, and one such dimer of one heavy and one light chain is joined to another dimer through interchain disulfide linkages. Now, this is the N-terminal domain of immunoglobulin chain, and from the N-terminal domain, about 110 amino acid residues region shows maximum sequence variation among immunoglobulin molecules. So, this region is called the variable region, and rest of the immunoglobulin molecule is called constant region. The variable region is responsible for binding to an antigen molecule. Now, if we look into the detailed map of the variable region, then we will see that intrachain disulfide linkages formed between two cysteine residues make a loop of 60 amino acids, and 3 regions of that loop actually show maximum sequence variation, and those 3 regions are called hypervariable regions. 3 such hypervariable regions are found on the light chain, 3 hypervariable regions are found on the heavy chain. Okay, together 6 hypervariable regions form an antigen binding site. Okay, thus each immunoglobulin molecule has 2 antigen binding sites on 2 arms, and the remaining part of the heavy chain reveal 5 basic sequence patterns. Either the sequence will be mu or epsilon or alpha or delta or gamma, and the immunoglobulins are named based on the sequence of the constant region. This region is called constant region of the heavy chain. When the constant region has a sequence of alpha, that immunoglobulin will be called IgA isotype. When the constant region sequence is mu, the isotype will be IgM. When the constant region sequence is epsilon, the immunoglobulin will be called IgE isotype. When the constant region sequence is delta, it will be called IgD isotype, and when the sequence is gamma, then the immunoglobulin molecule will be called IgG isotype. So, depending on the or based on the sequence present at the constant region of a heavy chain, the immunoglobulins are named differently. And if we look into the constant region of light chain, then we will see either lambda sequence or kappa sequence is present there. And actually this constant region part is responsible for mediating biological activity. So, the N-terminal end of the immunoglobulin molecule is responsible for antigen binding, and the carboxy terminal end or domain is responsible for binding to mediating the biological activity.
What is the significance of the disulfide linkages in an immunoglobulin structure?
Disulfide linkages are formed between two thiol groups. Now, in immunoglobulin chain, thiol groups are present on the cysteine amino acid residue. So, if two cysteine residues are present adjacent to each other, then the two thiol groups will combine together and form SS linkage or disulfide linkage. And due to the presence of these disulfide linkages, the 4 polypeptides of an immunoglobulin molecule are joined together. Now, the molecule which an antibody binds to is called an antigen. Now, the total of antigen is not bound to an antibody. Only parts of the antigen binds to the antibody, and those parts are called epitopes or antigenic determinants. Now, binding between an antigenic determinant and antigen binding site present on an immunoglobulin is through a number of non-covalent interactions, okay, like hydrogen bonds, hydrophobic interactions, ionic bond, then dipole-dipole bond, etc. So, a number of non-covalent interactions takes place between the antigenic determinant and the antigen binding site present on the immunoglobulin. And the more the number of non-covalent interactions between these two sites, the greater the affinity for the antibody towards that antigen. So, antigen-antibody affinity can be measured by measuring the number of bonds present between them and measuring the intensity of the bonds. And antigen-antibody interaction is just like an enzyme-substrate interaction. Only difference is enzyme-substrate reaction leads to an irreversible change, but here no irreversible change is seen. And we can measure the affinity of an immunoglobulin towards an antigen just by using this formulae, where Ka is called affinity constant. The greater is the value, the more is the affinity of an antibody towards an antigen. Now, all the molecules that bind to an immunoglobulin does not induce or activate the immune system. Clear? Some molecules activate the immune system and finally binds to the effector molecules like antibodies or T cell receptors. Those molecules are called immunogens. But there are some molecules which are unable to activate the immune system. But once immune system is activated and antibodies are released, they can bind to the antibodies. Okay, these molecules are called antigens. So antigens may or may not induce the immune system, whereas immunogens will always induce the immune system and then will bind to the final released molecules. Thus, we can say all the immunogens are antigens, because immunogens activate the immune system as well as they bind to the antibody. But not all antigens are immunogens. Now, we'll discuss what are the factors a molecule must possess to be an immunogen. Clear? Now, there are several factors or criteria which a molecule must satisfy to be an immunogen, like foreignness, molecular size, its molecular complexity, degradability, etc. I'll tell you first foreignness. Immune system can recognize the foreign molecules and the immunogenicity depends on the degree of foreignness. Okay, I'll give you an example, then it will be very clear. Suppose bovine serum albumin, that is the albumin protein extracted from cow. If we inject this protein into cow and into rabbit separately, it will be non-immunogenic to cow, because it is known to the cow. It is a self molecule to the cow. But to the rabbit, it is a non-self molecule. So, rabbit's immune system will be active against that molecule and the albumin, bovine serum albumin is immunogenic to rabbit. Clear? So, degree of foreignness depends on the distance in the phylogenetic tree. The more is the distance in the phylogenetic tree, the more is the structural or molecular disparity, structural disparity, and more is the immunogenicity. Like bovine serum albumin will be less immunogenic in goat compared to chicken. Can you tell me why?
Bovine serum albumin is extracted from cow, and cow and goat are more related to each other as per the phylogenetic tree. So it should be less immunogenic to goat, but chicken is much farther away in the phylogenetic tree, and that is why it will be more immunogenic to the chicken.
Yeah, very good. Now there are some exceptions like collagen A and cytochrome C. These two molecules are conserved throughout the evolution. If we extract this molecule from one donor and inject it into a recipient far distant in the phylogenetic tree, then also it will not show much immunogenicity because they are conserved throughout the evolution. Whereas there are some molecules which are sequestered from the immune system, like our corneal tissue. It is not exposed to our immune system. So, my corneal tissue will be immunogenic to me when taken out and given into my immune system, blood system. Similarly, sperm also acts as immunogenic to the system from where it has been isolated. The second criterion a molecule should fulfill to be an immunogen is its molecular weight or molecular size. Okay. The larger the molecule, the greater is the chance of its phagocytosis. That is why large insoluble molecules are better immunogens than compared to small soluble molecules. And it has been found that a molecule having molecular weight around 100 kilodalton is a good immunogen, whereas molecules having molecular weight less than 5 kilodalton is poor. Molecules having molecular weight less than 5 kilodalton are poor immunogens. Okay, that is why proteins are better immunogens than carbohydrates, since proteins have a large molecular weight. Now, next factor is chemical composition and complexity. I will give you an example. Suppose we have a copolymer of glutamic acid and lysine. Okay, a copolymer of glutamic acid and lysine needs a molecular weight of around 30 to 40,000 Dalton to be an immunogenic molecule. But if we introduce two more amino acid residues into it, like suppose phenylalanine and another amino acid like tyrosine, then the molecular weight reduces to around 5,000 Dalton, okay, to be an immunogenic molecule. So chemical complexity introduces immunogenicity. That is why proteins are better immunogens, since they have primary, secondary, tertiary and sometimes quaternary structure. The more is the complexity, more is the immunogenicity. Another important criterion a molecule should fulfill, that is degradability. Okay. Now what happens when a foreign molecule enters into our system? It is engulfed by the phagocytic cells or antigen presenting cells. Then that molecule is degraded into small parts, and some of the peptides are presented on the surface via a molecule called MHC. Now this degradability inside the phagocytic cell is very important. Suppose if we make a polymer of D amino acids, okay, it will not be degraded, because all our proteases they can degrade only the L amino acids, because L amino acids are found in the nature. So a polymer of D amino acid is not degradable, so it is not immunogenic at all. So degradability is the criterion a molecule should fulfill. So if we compare the immunogenicity of the biomolecules, then proteins are the best immunogens, then comes carbohydrates, and lipids are poor immunogens. But we can use lipids as antigens. Okay, like if we combine lipids are too small to be immunogenic, but they can combine with antibody. That means they can be antigenic. So if lipids are given with a bigger molecule, then antibodies can be raised against lipids. And the antibodies against lipids are very important in diagnostic purposes. Suppose in asthma patients, a particular lipid molecule called leukotriene, the level of leukotrienes increases in case of asthma patients. So if we have antibodies against those leukotrienes, then very easily we can detect the presence of leukotrienes. Now immunogenicity of a molecule also depends on the biological factors of the recipient. It depends on the genotype of the recipient. Genotype is the genetic constitution. So type and degree of immunogenicity of a molecule, foreign molecule, depends on the genotype of the recipient. Also immunogenicity of a molecule depends on its dose. Okay, if we introduce the foreign molecule at a very low dose, then it will not activate the immune system. Or if we introduce it at a very high dose, then it will lead to a state called anergy or unresponsiveness. So the actual dose should be sufficient to activate the immune system. At the same time, it should not be excess. And also the route of administration of the foreign molecule is very important. Okay, the foreign molecule can be introduced by various routes like intraperitoneally, intramuscularly, intradermally, intravenously. So activation sites are different. Okay, that is why route of administration is very important in case we want to activate the immune system. Now there are some small molecules which are antigenic but not immunogenic. Those molecules are called haptens. Okay, like lipids, I gave you the example. Now these haptens, suppose we want to raise antibody against a small molecule which is non-immunogenic. So it can't activate the immune system by its own. But if we conjugate that small molecule with a big molecule which is immunogenic, then together they will activate the immune response, and this time antibody will be generated both against a carrier molecule as well as against the hapten. And at the same time antibodies will be generated against the conjugated part also. Now sometimes we add adjuvants to a foreign molecule to increase its immunogenicity. Adjuvants are substances which enhance the immunogenicity of a molecule, like alum. Alum is potassium aluminium sulfate. It is a double salt. It is commonly used as an adjuvant. Another very important adjuvant is called Freund's adjuvant. It was discovered by Jules Freund. Okay, there are two types of Freund's adjuvants, complete and incomplete. Freund's incomplete adjuvant contains mineral oil and emulsifying agents, whereas Freund's complete adjuvant contains parts of the mycobacterium, heat kill mycobacterium. Okay, mainly muromyl dipeptide, a component of its cell membrane.
And what is the utility of adjuvant?
Suppose we have very less amount of a foreign molecule against which we want to raise the antibody, and the amount we have is not sufficient to activate the immune system. Now if we combine this small amount of antigen with adjuvant and introduce into the system, then due to the presence of the adjuvant, immune system boost up will be high. Okay, so we can get the antibody against that small amount of antigen. Or suppose we have a molecule which is poor immunogenic, okay, but we want to raise antibody against it, then also we can add adjuvant to that antigen, to that immunogen. Now how adjuvants work? In case of alum, when we mix alum with our molecule of interest against which we want to raise antibody, then that molecule gets precipitated, okay, and that alum precipitate when injected into the system, okay, since it is the size becomes large, phagocytosis of that molecule is enhanced, and due to the presence of the precipitate, release of antigen from that site becomes slow, so the antigen persists for long to that injection site. Okay, so without adjuvant, maybe few days antigen would have stayed for few days, but with the adjuvant, now it stays for several weeks. So antigen persistency increases, so immune system gets more time to see the antigen, so immune system boost up becomes more. In case of Freund's adjuvant, Freund's incomplete adjuvant contains oil. When the molecule of interest is mixed with the incomplete adjuvant, the oil forms liposome-like structure or micelles, and the antigen gets trapped inside the micelle. Now when it is introduced into the system, the micelle will slowly release the antigen. And in case of Freund's complete adjuvant, since it is containing parts of mycobacteria and those parts are highly immunogenic, so they will activate the immune system very much, and at the same time the immune system will be active against that molecule of interest too. That is why adjuvants are added to the foreign molecules against which we want to activate our immune system.